Switch 2 may be the best modern handheld that Nintendo has ever made. Obviously, second best handheld because the 3DS still exists, but this is a great system. Portable gaming industry is booming right now. We have a lot of companies jumping into the handheld market. Microsoft already confirmed like a rogue ally Microsoft thing, and potentially Sony coming out with a new PSP. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, this video is going to be focusing on the Steam Deck OLED and the Switch 2. And after spending weeks with both of these systems, I can confidently say that portable gaming is back, baby. We are back. We are so back. And the reason that I want to focus on these two systems in particular right now is because they are what most people are probably gravitating towards or considering when they're looking at what portable consoles exist in 2025. However, both of these systems do have their own unique pros and cons. But in this video, we're going to be doing a full deep dive into both systems, share what I like, what I don't, who I think each system is for, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a much clearer idea of which system would make the most sense for you. But first, a quick recap of the past few years. The Steam Deck OLED is an updated version of Valve's original handheld PC, the Steam Deck. It launched with a bigger OLED screen, better battery life, quieter fans, and pretty much everything people wanted for a upgrade from the first model. And for this video, we're going to be comparing the Steam Deck OLED to the Switch 2 because I have had both Steam Decks and I believe that the OLED is a substantial upgrade to the original. So everything I say about specs, size, and performance will be referring to the Steam Deck OLED and not the original version. The Switch 2, on the other hand, is Nintendo's long awaited upgrade to the original Switch. It sticks to the hybrid concept, but brings better performance, stronger graphics, and trust me, a lot more power under the hood. Both of these systems represent the next generation of portable gaming, but they are going in completely different directions. At the time of this recording, the Switch 2 is about a month old, and it's already sold over 5 million units worldwide, which is wow. And while Valve doesn't report exact numbers, both Steam Decks combined are estimated to have sold around 6 million units lifetime. Both are very healthy numbers, but the Switch 2 is off to a wild start. That said, there are a lot of rumors out there saying that the Switch 2's momentum has slowed down substantially since its initial launch, so we're gonna have to just wait and see how that plays out. And stick around to the end of the video to see who wins this comparison and which system I would recommend for you. That's enough yapping, let's jump into the comparison. Starting with the design of these systems. And we'll start with the Steam Deck OLED. The device measures at 11.7 by 1.9 inches with a 7.4 inch OLED display compared to the original Steam Deck, which had a 7-inch screen. It has a resolution of 1280 by 800p and now supports 90 Hz refresh rate, which is a noticeable upgrade from the original model. One of the best parts about the Steam Deck OLED is the weight of it. It comes in weighing approximately 640 grams or 22.5 ounces, which is actually lighter than the original Steam Deck. This is easily one of the most comfortable handheld systems I have ever used. Yes, even compared to my 3DS. I used to think that the PlayStation Portal was the most comfortable system, but I have to admit the Steam Deck OLED has solidified itself as the most comfortable for me. When you compare the weight, the size, the overall design, it really starts to feel almost perfect. And on top of that, you get 4 back buttons that can be mapped to any button per game. No extra peripherals, no extra cost. They're just built into this system, and if you don't use them, you barely even notice that they're there. The build quality is top notch, and the device feels premium as it should for a $550 device. Oh, and in case you didn't know, every Steam Deck does come with a case. It's not fancy, just enough to store the system and a small pouch for the charger, but I've never felt the need to upgrade from it. It's a nice touch of added value and something that I do appreciate. So that's a lot of positives about the OLED. What about the Switch 2? The Switch 2 measures at about 10.7 inches wide with the Joy-Cons attached and stands around 4.5 inches tall. It has a 7.9 inch display, which is slightly larger than the Steam Deck OLED and much larger than the original Switch. The resolution is 1920 by 1080p and it supports up to 120 Hz refresh rate, which does beat the Steam Deck on paper. As for weight, the Switch 2 comes at 534 grams or 1.18 pounds with the Joy-Cons attached. Again, lighter than the Steam Deck. A lot of positives here too. The Switch 2 actually surprised me with how much it's improved over the original. Now, some people online might try to tell you that the Switch 2 is not powerful. They'll try to compare it to a PS5 or a modern PC, but in reality, it's packing a punch. For the price, the Switch 2 is one of the strongest handhelds you can get right now. So you get a lot of power with the Switch 2, which is great. But there is one huge issue for me, and that is the ergonomics of the system. Honestly, I really do not like how the Switch 2 feels in my hands. The bigger size helps, but the Joy-Cons are holding this thing back. Once you've used the Steam Deck or the Portal, you realize how comfortable modern handhelds have gotten. And it's unfortunate that Nintendo has cornered themselves into this detachable Joy-Con design. And before you jump into the comments saying, oh, just get a Pro controller, oh, just get third-party Joy-Cons, we're not doing that. In this video, we will be comparing both systems straight out of the box, no accessories, no peripherals, just what comes with the system. That said, I do gotta give props to Nintendo for making all of my old Joy-Cons and Pro controllers work on my Switch 2, so that backwards compatibility of the old controllers is really, really cool. And I gotta give them props for that, I really do. So who wins in the design category? Well, for me, it's the Steam Deck OLED. I understand the novelty of Joy-Cons. Yes, it's nice being able to pass one to a friend for a quick game, but realistically, it just does not happen enough to justify how uncomfortable they are to play solo. The Steam Deck offers comfort, flexibility, and bonus features like the back buttons, all built in at no extra cost. It's just such a well-designed system and one of the best handheld form factors I've used ever. Now, when it comes to performance, these are completely different beasts. The Steam Deck OLED is basically a handheld gaming PC. It runs a custom AMD APU and can handle modern AAA games like Elden Ring, Cyberpunk, and Baldur's Gate 3 with solid performance, especially with FSR enabled. You're not hitting 60 FPS consistently, and you're definitely not playing on ultra settings, but it's running natively, and that's impressive for a handheld, unlike the PlayStation Portal. What really stands out about the Steam Deck OLED is its flexibility. You could tweak settings, install mods, emulate games if you own them, or you could even use it as a full Linux PC. In fact, my first ever stream on YouTube was from my Steam Deck. I was playing Heart Gold, Soul Silver, Nuzlocke from my Steam Deck onto YouTube. I kid you not, dude. The newer OLED model also runs quieter than the original Steam Deck, which makes a big difference when you're actually playing the damn thing. Trust me, the first Steam Deck got super loud. And being able to lower shaders, cap frame rates, and mess with every little detail, well, that's just a dream for some people. It's not perfect. Some AAA games will still need compromises, but the sheer freedom this system gives you makes up for it. Now, with performance, the Switch 2 takes a completely different approach. It's very much console first. It runs a custom NVIDIA chip based on DLSS capable architecture, and for a Nintendo handheld, the leap in power is crazy. It can now output 4K when docked thanks to that DLSS and 1080p in handheld mode. That's a huge jump from the original Switch, and even more powerful on paper than the Steam Deck OLED. Games like Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza look absolutely stunning, and even third-party games like Cyberpunk 2077 run decently. It's not perfect, but honestly, it holds up just as well as the Steam Deck in a lot of these cases. And we'll be getting new third-party games later on in the future, like Persona 3 and Elden Ring, that we'll be able to compare to the Steam Deck when those release. That said, You are locked to Nintendo's ecosystem, so that means no modding, no tweaking, no emulating the games you own. You can't change the resolution settings or install custom shaders, but what you do get is consistent, optimized performance. Nintendo's first-party games are designed to run flawlessly. And when you buy a Switch 2 game, you never have to worry how well it's going to run on the Switch 2 because most of the time they're running pretty well. It's also worth pointing out that docking is simple. Yes, the Steam Deck technically supports docking too, but remember, we are comparing what comes out of the box, and in this case, the Switch 2 has that advantage. I love playing both systems handheld, but having the option to easily play on the TV like the Switch does is a huge plus. So who wins the performance round? I'm gonna give it to the Switch 2. It feels powerful, fast, and snappy, and the Steam Deck Oled is fantastic, but I've had some quirks with it, like the startup animation playing twice, or the device just not turning on right away. It's really small stuff, but when you compare it with the Switch 2, I never have those issues. Switch 2 just works. Every game runs. No headaches, no Linux settings to mess with. It's a smooth experience. And it feels like a really polished Nintendo system. You know how they do. It's always clean, always feels great to use. And speaking of running games, that brings us to our next comparison, the systems library. I actually made a video about my Steam Deck Oled when I received it, and in that video I said that I was having a lot of fun with my Switch 2, but I got bored very quickly. I liked Mario Kart World enough. It's not my favorite game of the year. Dude, it's not even my favorite Mario Kart ever, but it was decent. And I played Donkey Kong Bonanza, but that game lasted me like 2 or 3 days, and I just have not felt like doing a second playthrough. So when I finally got my Steam Deck Oled, it was a relief. I was deep into Metaphor ReFantazio at the time, and I had just started an SMT5 Vengeance playthrough. I was jumping into V Rising with my friends. I mean, there is just so much more to do. The Steam Deck Oled just simply offers more right now. And yes, the Switch 2 is backwards compatible, and that's great. But I've already played all of the Switch games I cared about on the original Switch. So when it comes to new or exclusive games on the Switch 2, we're kind of in a dry spell right now. I'm sure that will change in the future. The same thing happened with the Switch 1 after Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild. There wasn't really much to do, but give it a few years and the Switch 1's library blew up. I have no doubts that the Switch 2 will have the same thing happen. But again, we are just not there yet. Meanwhile, the Steam Deck's library keeps growing. More and more Steam games are being verified. And while it's not the entire Steam catalog, it's still a massive amount of games. And there's just something really satisfying knowing that your game runs on Steam Deck and on Steam, and just jumping back and forth between your desktop and your handheld. It's a really good feeling. But to be fair, like I mentioned, it is a plus knowing that when you buy a game on the Switch 2, that it's going to work. You're not going to have to like tweak any settings or mess with anything like that. So that is a plus that the Switch 2 does have, in my opinion. But overall, in the game category, I'm going to give this point to the Steam Deck Oled. Hands down, it just has more right now. And possibly always. I'm not sure. Now, if you're trying to play all these games on the go, battery life becomes a major factor. And honestly, neither of these systems are really amazing in that department, but for different reasons. The Steam Deck Oled makes huge improvements to the battery life compared to the original Steam Deck. We're talking 30 to 50% better battery life depending on the game. That's a really big deal. When I played SMT5 on my original Steam Deck, I was getting about 2 to 3 hours. And when I switched over to my OLED, I started to get like 3 to 5 hours. From experience, I saw how much the battery life changed. The OLED screen helps save power and it looks way better. But, and this is important, it's still a gaming PC, so if you are running something like Cyberpunk and Baldur's Gate 3, the battery is going to drop fast. If you're going to play any AAA game on the Steam Deck, you are going to need to tweak settings, cap some frame rate, lower that brightness because it will drain the battery so fast. Now with the Switch 2, I will be honest, it is a little bit more consistent than the Steam Deck, but it's not great either. I was averaging about 4 to 6 hours depending on the game. Donkey Kong and Mario Kart didn't drain my battery too quickly, but they still didn't last as long as I had hoped. The big win here is Nintendo's optimization. Their games are super efficient, they run well, and last a solid amount of time. So here are the basic trade-offs. With the Steam Deck, you get high performance and potentially great battery life, but only if you manage it. It means you have to be tweaking your settings, you have to be capping frame rates, just your normal PC stuff. But with the Switch 2, you get simple, predictable battery life, no settings that you need to mess with other than brightness. You just get good performance and efficiency out of the box. And from what I've seen online, the Steam Deck battery life should last you between 2 to 8 hours, again depending on which game you're playing, and the Switch 2 lasts between 2.5 and 6.5 hours. So on paper, the Steam Deck should be providing better battery life. So who wins this round? Honestly, the 3DS, because oh my god, dude, I've been playing SMT4 and my shit lasts like 12 hours, dude. It's so good. Okay, but seriously, I'm gonna have to give the win to the Steam Deck OLED here with an asterisk. That is, if you are willing to manage your battery, it can get better battery life and better performance than the Switch 2. Even though neither is amazing in this category, the Steam Deck gives you that control. It gives you the option to change those settings, so it tips the favor to the Steam Deck. So during this video, I found myself talking about the flexibility on the Steam Deck gives you, and it's great. But depending on who you are, this can definitely be a double-edged sword, especially when it comes to things like the UI and operating systems. So let's talk about the UI of both of these handhelds, because this is where things get interesting. The Switch 2 has a super clean, user-friendly interface, and if you're coming from the original Switch, this layout feels very familiar. It's exactly what you'd expect from Nintendo, made for quick play sessions, minimal clutter, and snappy navigation. You boot the thing up, and it works, literally in seconds. The Steam Deck OLED, on the other hand, again, is basically a PC. Hit that like button if you heard that one before, am I right? And the Steam Deck is powerful, customizable, and it gives you access to your entire Steam library and more. But all of that power comes with some friction. You'll occasionally have to deal with some updates that might mess with your emulation stuff. You will have to deal with some desktop mode weirdness and some random controller mapping issues sometimes. And if you don't believe me, try booting up Digimon Cyber Sleuth on your Steam Deck or Sonic Adventure 2. I'll wait. And that kind of weird stuff is the stuff that typical console gamers, they just don't want to think about. So if you want the plug and play simplicity, the Switch 2 wins hands down. But if you love the idea of like tinkering around, messing with the UI and operating systems, and you don't mind putting in some elbow grease, the Steam Deck is on another league entirely. For me personally, I'm giving this round to the Switch 2. I'm sorry, as someone who is trying to grow their YouTube channel, hold a full-time job, there's no denying how easy it is to just turn your Switch 2 on and start playing it. It's underrated if you're gonna ask me. And now, onto the most important comparison in this video. It is something that matters way more than people admit, and that is portability. Now keep in mind, the king of portable gaming consoles is still the 3DS. But I did just get a PlayStation Vita. So if you're interested on my thoughts on this system, hit that subscribe button because we will be making a video soon. Both of these systems are handhelds and both of them are portable. but one is clearly easier to travel with than the other. The Switch 2 is slim, light, and the detachable Joy-Cons actually help with the portability. It slides into a case and fits basically in any backpack. I got a case for like 10 bucks from Walmart, nothing special, but it fits in almost all of my backpacks, all my travel bags, no problem. And now I do complain a lot about how uncomfortable the Switch 2 is to hold, but on the bright side, it's actually pretty portable. And we already talked about the battery life, it not being amazing, but you don't really need to travel with a charger or a battery bank for short commutes or outing. But to be fair, I personally bring one whenever I travel with either of the systems, just in case. Now, the Steam Deck Oled, it's definitely improved over the original. It's lighter, better battery life, and of course that beautiful OLED screen. But let's be real, it's a chunky boy. It's a chunky boy. This is the kind of thing that you have to plan to bring with you. I literally have to make like a to-do list to make sure I pack everything for the Steam Deck. Like, do I got the right case? Is it gonna fit in the backpack I'm trying to take? Like, I gotta plan for it. I mean, look at this thing. It's absolutely massive. Side by side, it eats up the Switch 2 almost massively. The Steam Deck OLED is not a toss it in your bag last minute type of system. It's just not. And again, depending on what you're playing, you're going to need a charger quick. Even with settings turned down, games like Elden Ring will tap your system out in like 2 hours. I know other games last longer, but it just really depends. Before I forget, the Switch 2 still uses cartridges and has physical games, while the Steam Deck does not. It's not a huge deal, but if you are a stickler like me, you want to make sure that your cloud saves upload properly on Steam before continuing on desktop. Usually that works automatically over Wi-Fi, but if you're out and about, you got to do that whole make sure you log on to your Steam Deck as soon as you get home. Your cloud save can go up and then play it on your desktop thing, you know? There's some extra steps involved with that. So the major takeaways here are, if you are looking for the more convenient travel option, that goes for the Switch 2. I mean, it's literally built for that. But if you're okay with planning ahead and carrying a bit more gear, albeit less than an actual gaming PC, the Steam Deck OLED gives you an amazing on-the-go experience when you actually prepare properly. And as someone who has been filming, editing, and traveling a lot more lately, I find myself reaching out for my Steam Deck. I know, it's bulkier, it's a huge hassle sometimes, but the game library, man, there's nothing to do on the Switch 2. But in reality, this round does go to the Switch 2 because it is just plain more portable. I cannot deny the fact that it is easier to travel with, it is easier to do anything with the Switch 2. But that brings me to the next comparison, and that is the value of each system. Yes, the price of both systems do matter, but so does the performance, lifespan, and library of each system. Right now, the Switch 2 retails for $450 to $500 if you get the Mario bundle, at least at the time of recording this, because Nintendo just raised the price for the Switch 1, so who knows how long that's gonna last. And the Steam Deck OLED starts at $550 for the 512GB model and $649 for the 1TB model. Full transparency, I personally got the Mario Kart bundle with my Switch 2, and I got the 512GB model for my Steam Deck OLED. So for me, the prices were pretty similar, but the value isn't just about what you pay today, it's about long-term value. For example, consider library sizes. Right now, the Steam Deck absolutely blows the Switch 2 out of water, but in 5 years, sure, the Switch 2 may have a lot more games, but it still won't match the Steam Deck's library. This is Nintendo versus literally every other publisher in the world. Matter of fact, Doug Bowser himself has actually confirmed that the controversial game cards for the Switch 2 were designed to get more third-party developers on board with the system. But the Steam Deck doesn't have to do anything like that at all. Most modern games are already running on the Steam Deck. Now, when you're dropping $500 into a system, you better know what you're getting into. And unfortunately, the Switch has a bad rap for most of its games having a Switch tax attached to it. It was practically a meme in the Switch 1 era that games like The Witcher 3 would cost $20 on the PS5, but still $60 on the Switch. Nintendo games especially almost never go on sale, while Steam, on the other hand, always has sales going on. And like the summer sale is super goated. But that said, there are cases where the Switch 2 does beat the Steam Deck in long-term and short-term value. For example, resale value. Nintendo's hardware always holds its value much better than almost every other system. If you try to sell your Switch 2, you'll likely get closer to what you paid for than if you try to sell your Steam Deck. Another pro is that the Switch 2 just launched, so we will not be getting a Switch 3 anytime soon. On the other hand, the Steam Deck has been around for a really long time, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get a Steam Deck 2 announcement in the next 1 to 3 years. So Switch 2 technically might have a longer lifespan than your Steam Deck. But now we have to consider the subscription model situation. Nintendo now charges for online play and for their retro game services, which in my opinion is absurdly overpriced. The Steam Deck, well, you can play online games for free there. And, well, those retro games that you are paying an arm and a leg for on the Switch 2 can probably be played on your Steam Deck. Probably. So which has better value today? Well, for most people, it's probably going to be the Switch 2. It's going to sell like crazy. It's going to sell better than the Steam Deck. It has Pokemon, it's going to have Zelda, and all the Nintendo exclusives that fans love. But if you ask me, I'm giving this round to the Steam Deck Oled. It can play 70 to 80% of all new release games, and it has a massive back catalog. And Valve themselves have come out and said that 85% of Steam users mainly play older games, which run perfectly on the Steam Deck. And Steam sales, free online play, it's really hard to beat. But be aware that the Steam Deck 2 may be coming out soon. And now for the final bonus round. This section covers everything that I couldn't fit into the other categories, but I felt were still important to mention. So let's start with the Nintendo controversies. Should all of these controversies impact your decision on buying a Switch 2? Well, it really depends on which controversies bother you the most. For me, it was the Joy-Con controversy. They're still using the same analog technology from the original Switch, which means Joy-Con drift is still a thing. Yes, it is a huge bummer, especially because these things are expensive as hell, and you'd think that after 7 years, Nintendo would have figured it out. But here we are. The second major controversy is the price. The Switch 2 is already expensive, but games being $70 to $80 is freaking ridiculous. And honestly, why are you charging people $10 for a welcome tour? Like, that's actually price gouging. And honestly, it's not even the worst part, because there is a physical button on here that's locked behind a paywall. You cannot use this button unless you pay Nintendo's online subscription. That is a real thing. You can't use a button on this damn system unless you pay Nintendo more money. And while I'm frustrated, honestly, I'm just going to let this out. The fact that I can't use any other USB-C charger for my Switch 2 dock pisses me off. You have to use the dock that your Switch 2 comes with. Not the dock. You have to use the charger that the Switch 2 comes with, or your dock won't work. How stupid is that? You better not lose the charger, or you can't use the stupid dock. Like, it's annoying. It's ridiculous. Now, to be fair, I'm kind of going off on the Switch 2, but the Steam Deck's not perfect either. Linux is a huge learning curve for this thing, and I swear to God, if anybody in the comments says that Linux is easy, go touch grass. You don't have to mess with it often, but sometimes you do. Especially with older games that aren't Steam Deck verified, you'll need to hop into like desktop mode and change some stuff, which usually means that there's like a 15-minute YouTube tutorial attached to that. So it's not the end of the world, but still. Also, remote play is an option for your Steam Deck. I don't use it much since it needs a really strong internet connection, but it works fine. It works just like the PlayStation Portal, streaming games from your PC. It's actually a solid workaround for games that are not Steam Deck verified, that are brand new, like Battlefield 6. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was the modding of these systems. Nintendo has gone out of their way to make sure you can't mess with your Switch 2. The terms of service even say that they can break your console if you are doing something shady. Dude, 3DS owners are shaking right now. That's either going to go very well or very poorly, because a lot of people have already been testing the waters and taking Nintendo's warning more of like a challenge accepted. We'll see how that goes. But on the other hand, the Steam Deck is very emulation friendly. Not that I would recommend that to you, but if you were to accidentally Google how to emulate games on your Steam Deck, you might find out how easy it really is to do that. I'm saying that because I don't believe in emulation. Nintendo, please send me games. Please send me stuff. Please, Daddy. So honestly, in this bonus round, I'm just going to give the point to Steam Deck. It pisses me off less than the Switch 2. The Switch 2 just does stuff that doesn't make sense for me, and I just don't see why Nintendo would do certain things. I feel like they shoot themselves in the foot. Like I don't know what they're doing. If you've gotten this far in the video, thank you so much, and I would appreciate it if you would consider hitting that like button. Otherwise, who truly wins the battle between the Steam Deck OLED and the Switch 2? Well, in the end of the day, it really depends on the consumer. For the average family or child, it's super easy to just use the Switch 2, and it's very predictable, so it makes it a no-brainer to go with the Switch 2. However, for everyone else, especially PC and or console gamers, I gotta give it to the Steam Deck. This thing continues to blow me out of the water. And I did complain a little bit about Linux, but if you are willing to dip your toes into that unknown world, it could truly be fulfilling and fun to learn, because the Steam Deck doesn't just provide games, it could do so much more. And I will admit, I do really like the Switch 2, but at its current state, it's not at its full potential. I'm very excited to see what Nintendo has in store for the Switch 2, especially if we continue to get really cool exclusive like Dust Bloods. Then some people might actually feel forced to get the Switch 2 because they have such unique and special games like that. And if I didn't make it clear enough, my personal choice is obviously the Steam Deck OLED. It just provides such a great experience. It is honestly an amazing handheld, and you won't regret buying one. And I really hope that this video helps sway you one way or another if you are still undecisive on which system you want to get. But rest assured that either one that you decide to get, you will certainly have a good time with. Let me know in the comments if you want recommendations of what games I think that you should play right now and what system that you're on. And I hope that you have a wonderful day, night, whatever time it is around you. Have a wonderful day. Love you.